Hello and welcome back. You're listening to Unreliable Sources, your biweekly briefing for mystery lovers, thriller junkies, and suspense addicts. I'm Mike Donohue, thriller author and deeply suspicious of anyone who doesn't read. Let's get into it. On today's show, a big week for new books, including the one everyone in literary crime fiction has been circling on their calendar. We'll also cover some genuinely fun headlines from the worlds of book and culture. And I'll dig into my favorite thriller series that scratched the Jack Reacher itch. Because yes, there's a whole ecosystem of lone wolves out there, and I've been deep in research. Plus, what I'm reading and watching, and a quick note on March Madness and its surprising overlap with crime fiction. Bear with me, people. Let's roll. Let's kick things off with some recent headlines. NPR ran a piece this week on the timeless appeal of Sherlock Holmes, and honestly, is it ever not the right time for this conversation? Holmes has been adapted something like 75 times or more across film and television. Every generation gets its version: the Victorian original, the suave Basil Rathbone, the brilliant but antisocial Benedict Cumberbatch. The underlying appeal is pure and durable. A mind so precise it turns chaos into order. In a world that sometimes feels like the opposite of that, it just makes sense. The piece is worth a read if you're in the mood to feel good about being a genre nerd. I'll drop the link in the show notes. This one is genuinely delightful and perfectly timely as I go through line edits on the most recent thriller I wrote. The Smithsonian covered a new exhibition opening at Yale's Sterling Memorial Library called Beauties of My Style, Errata and the Printed Mistake. It's a 5-century history of typos, and it's more fascinating than it has any right to be. The centerpiece is a 1631 edition of the Bible that accidentally printed the 7th commandment as, "Thou shalt commit adultery." Just missing a little word there, like not. 1,000 copies were printed before anyone caught it. The king fined the publisher, stripped their license, and the edition earned the immortal nickname the Wicked Bible. Roughly 20 copies survive today. One of them has had "not" added back in by hand, which is the most optimistic editing note I've ever heard. There's also an errata sheet from James Joyce's Ulysses listing over 200 mistakes. Joyce was asked about some of the corrections and told his editors, and I'm paraphrasing here, that they weren't errors, they were just beauties of his style, which is either genius or completely insufferable, and honestly, with Joyce, I can never quite decide. This won't be new to any book nerds, but Barnes & Noble is having a moment, or continues to have a moment. There have been plenty of these stories, and The Atlantic ran one recently about the chain's unlikely resurgence. They spent 15 years bleeding stores in irrelevance, then got acquired in 2019 by the same group that runs Waterstones in the UK. Their CEO, James Daunt, was put in control, and he immediately handed back that control to store managers, individual store managers, and the whole thing just started working again. They opened more new stores in 2024 than the entire decade before it, and they have 60 more planned for 2026. And here's the part I find genuinely interesting. The strategy was basically to stop being a big box distribution warehouse with a cafe staple to it and start being, an actual bookstore, curated, local, a little idiosyncratic, which is what all the indie stores have been doing the whole time, of course. But apparently it can also translate at scale. If you haven't been in a Barnes & Noble recently, it might be worth checking out. Your mileage may vary, but the ones I've been in do feel a bit different, less like a Target that also sells books. Finally, No Film School ran a piece this week collecting the most essential film noir quotes: Double Indemnity, The Big Sleep, Out of the Past. If you write or read in the genre, or just love it, it's a great read. The DNA of that era is everywhere in modern crime fiction when you know where to look. All right, now let's take a look at what's new and notable on book and library store shelves. The big one this week, and probably the biggest literary crime release of the year, is Tana French's The Keeper. This is the third and final book in the Cal Hooper trilogy, following The Searcher and The Hunter. Cal is a retired Chicago detective who moved to a small village in the west of Ireland, built a quiet life, found love, mentored a wayward teenager named Trey, and now a young woman is dead in a river, and the whole fragile piece he's constructed is at risk. According to reviews, French closes out this trilogy the way she does everything. A slow build, atmospheric. Characters, you feel you actually know. If you've been waiting to binge all 3, the wait is finally over. And if you haven't started the series yet, actually, I'm a little envious of you. Tanya French's The Keeper, out now. Check it out. Sorry for Your Loss by Georgia McVeigh, a sharp, darkly funny psychological thriller with a premise that immediately earns your attention. I'll let the book speak for itself on this one, but it's getting strong early buzz and the voice is distinctive. Keep an eye out. The latest from Steve Kavanaugh, Two Kinds of Stranger. Eddie Flynn's 9th outing. Kavanaugh is one of those reliable thriller writers working. This one involves a social media influencer who does a random act of kindness for a stranger on a subway platform and ends up in a nightmare she can't convince anyone is real. The premise is unique, sharp, and it's been described as Hitchcockian, which, given what we were just discussing with the film noir piece, feels apt. Two Kinds of Stranger by Steve Kavanaugh. Finally, The Survivor by Andrew Reed, Reed's U.S. debut and one of the most high-concept setups I've seen in a while. Ben Cross gets fired on the first day of his new job in New York City, boards the one train uptown, and almost immediately starts receiving anonymous texts from a killer. Stay on the train, don't turn off your phone, follow instructions, or else. It's been described as Die Hard on a subway. Film rights are already optioned, and both Nick Petrie and Mark Greaney give it a strong blurb. Read it before Hollywood gets a hold of it. The Survivor by Andrew Reed. All right, feature time. I just finished Nick Petrie's 9th Peter Ash novel, Dark Times, and it sent me straight into that particular Bose book fog, that hollow ache where a great character has moved on and you're standing in your kitchen hunting for something that hits in the same way. So I put together a piece on my site this week, 5 lone wolf thriller series for true Reacher fans. Let me walk you through it. But first, why does Reacher work so well? Because understanding that, I think, is the whole key to finding a worthy substitute. For me, what Lee Child engineered isn't just a tough guy who wins fights, it's something older and more elemental than that. Scholars have a term for it, the errant justice motif. The wanderer who arrives in a broken place, sees the rot the locals have learned to live with, and refuses to walk away. He fixes it, usually, in Reacher's case, with extreme prejudice, and then he leaves. No roots, no reward, no dramatic farewell. That's the knight errant. It's medieval, chivalric romance stripped down and put in a pair of jeans. It's the samurai Ronin drifting between villages. It's Shane riding off at the end, the gunslinger who cleans up the town and disappears before anyone can give him a parade. What makes Reacher specifically brilliant is that Child figured out the psychological version of this as well. Reacher doesn't brood. He doesn't carry trauma like a backpack. He carries a folding toothbrush. That stability, that almost eerie self-possession, or maybe willful ignorance, is actually quite rare in modern literary fiction, which tends to assume that a damaged past is the price of admission for a compelling character. Child rejected that entirely, for the most part. Reacher is the justice system in these novels. He doesn't defer to institutions because the institutions, cops, lawyers, local power structures, are almost always the problem. He is the correction. And here's the other thing I think that sets Child apart. The prose serves the character. Short sentences, punchy, forward momentum. He famously described his approach as writing the slow parts fast and the fast parts slow, which means fight scenes unfold in almost cinematic frame-by-frame detail, while the miles between towns disappear in a single sentence. That rhythm is deeply satisfying in a way that's hard to articulate, but very easy to feel. So, when I'm evaluating a series for this list, I'm asking a set of specific questions. Does the protagonist wander into other people's problems? Does he carry a moral code stronger than any badge? Does the prose actually move? And does he feel genuinely, credibly dangerous? Not in a superhero way, but in a quiet, unhurried, you should really reconsider this way. So with that rubric in mind, here are my 5 choices. You probably could guess the first, given the lead-in. Peter Ash by Nick Petrie, my personal favorite, and the reason this article exists. Start with The Drifter. It won both the ITW Award for Best First Novel and the Barry Award. Peter is a former Marine, competent as Reacher, but he has to wander. It's not a lifestyle choice, it's survival. His PTSD makes enclosed spaces unbearable. The nomadism is structural, not decorative. And where Reacher is mythically impassive, Peter bleeds a little more, talks a little more, but there's still that lean, propulsive writing. This series has some real legs, and 9 books in, it continues to show it's a worthy successor to Child. Next, another big bestseller you probably heard of, Orphan X by Greg Hurwitz. Evan Smoke was pulled from the orphanage at 12 and trained to be a government assassin. Now he operates as the Nowhere Man. Desperate people somehow find his disconnected number, and he shows up and handles it. That mirrors the Reacher's template almost exactly. Difference is that Evan's moral code is formal. He follows what he calls the 10 Commandments, rules drilled into him to keep him human. Lee Child himself has endorsed this series 11 books deep, and the Goodreads ratings actually improve with each entry, which is almost unheard of for Goodreads. Number 3, The Gray Man by Mark Greaney. Court Gentry is a former CIA operative betrayed by his own agency, now operating freelance at a geopolitical altitude. If Reacher fights in diners, Gentry fights in Prague safe houses. More global, more tactical. Lee Child also blurbed the first book as hard, fast, and unflinching. There's the Netflix film from about 10 years ago with Ryan Gosling, which gives it some cultural surface area for getting friends and family on board. Number 4, sort of a backdoor one here, Joe Pike by Robert Kreis. Kreis holds the Mystery Writers of America Grand Master designation. Pike, red arrow tattoos on his delts, permanent mirrored sunglasses, a silence that functions as a weapon. Maybe the most Reacher-adjacent physical archetype in crime fiction. For Reacher fans, start with The Watchmen, where Pike goes solo protecting a witness from professional killers. It's pure, brilliant, and propulsive. Finally, number 5, maybe a little less known than the others, Quinn Coulson by Ace Atkins. This might be the most emotionally honest take on the Reacher premise in the genre, because Coulson doesn't pass through a broken town. He's from that broken town. He came back from war, supremely confident, and found his Mississippi home rotten in ways he can't unsee. Atkins writes with the grit of Southern noir and the genuine literary weight. Great dialogue, characters that feel lived in. If you want Reacher with more roots and atmosphere, Quinn Coulson by Ace Atkins is your person and your series. I have even a deeper breakdown with archetypes, series entry points, characteristics, why you might love each one even more over at MikeDonohueBooks.com. All right, wrapping up this week with what I'm reading and watching. Well, as we've covered multiple times now, I just finished up Petrie's Dark Times, but I want to say it again. This series is firing on all cylinders, 9 books in. If you're a Reacher fan who hasn't started Peter Ash yet, The Drifter is your assignment. I really should be on Petrie's payroll at this point for how many times I've pushed that first book into people's hands. On audio, I'm listening to Lisa Jewell's Don't Let Him In. That was her latest back last summer. It's good. It's solid. It's also making me deeply, genuinely uncomfortable, which is a credit to her writing. There are moments where I actually have to hit pause just to breathe before the scene fully lands. Yes, I know it's fiction. I was the same way when I watched episodes of The Office. I don't like direct confrontation. Cringe comedy freaks me out. Here it wasn't comedy, but it was just the particular dread that Jewell does better than almost anyone else that had me squinting and squirming. And on TV, I'll be honest with you, I've been mostly watching the NCAA basketball tournament. March Madness has my full attention, and I have zero regrets. If you think about it, the tournament is basically a crime fiction plot engine. Rising heroes, shocking upsets, villains haunting power conference seatings, a ticking clock, literally, and at least one jaw-dropping twist per day. The genre DNA is all there. I'm calling it research. All right, that's a wrap for episode 19. Let me leave you with this week's question. Which Reacher series do you swear by? Is it Peter Ash? Evan Smoke, something I missed completely? Drop me a line. I'd genuinely love to feature listener picks in a future episode. And if there's a Lone Wolf series that belongs on this list that I didn't mention, make the case. My inbox is open. Mike at MikeDonohueBooks.com, or find me on Blue Sky at MikeDMystery, or on Instagram and Facebook at Mike Donohue Books. This has been Unreliable Sources. I'm Mike Donohue. Thanks for listening. Until next time, stay sharp, follow the clues, and don't trust anyone who skips to the end.